Have you ever been told just focus, pay attention, try harder, it's not that hard? That's something that so many of us ADHDers hear on a day-to-day basis. Having ADHD can feel like you're trying to navigate through a maze with no map while everyone else is following a straight line and has no problem reaching their end goal. For us ADHDers, it can also feel like you're kind of solving a puzzle where the puzzle pieces keep changing shape, keep changing color every time you look away, and everyone else seems to be solving the puzzle without any issues. And that's just the beginning of what it's like to have ADHD. And that's why today I want to talk all about ADHD. What is ADHD? What are the symptoms, and what could that look like from person to person? Imagine you're in a crowded room and everyone is talking all at once and you're trying to think. That's overwhelming, right? And that's what it feels like to have ADHD. Your mind is restless. You have so many thoughts in your head all the time, and then you have to concentrate and pay attention. It's kind of like playing the game whack-a-mole with your own thoughts. And that can be so overwhelming. Or imagine trying to remember all the appointments that you made, be on time. All of these things are super challenging for ADHDers. So let's dive in what it means to have ADHD and what it could look like. ADHD stands for Attention Deficit Hyperactivity Disorder. And I know it's a very long word. That's why most of us stick to the abbreviation ADHD. And ADHD is a neurodevelopmental disorder. That means it impacts our cognitive function as well as our behavior. And contrary to popular belief, ADHD is a real medical condition. And if you have ADHD, that does not mean that you're lazy. It does not mean that you're stupid. It is an actual medical condition. And contrary to popular belief, ADHD isn't something that the individual exaggerates or makes up. It's a real medical condition, and that also often extends into adulthood. So not only children or teens can experience it or have that condition, but also many adults have ADHD. ADHD is one of the most prevalent conditions, where about 5% of children have ADHD worldwide, and also 2.5% of adults have ADHD worldwide. Now, if you think that you might have ADHD, know someone with ADHD, or you have just been diagnosed with ADHD and you're curious about what it means to have ADHD, what that could look like, stick around because we're gonna talk about all the different symptoms that someone with ADHD might experience. Unfortunately, ADHD, that's also why it's referred to as a disorder, can present a fair number of challenges in our day-to-day life. So it could be struggling to pay attention while you're doing your homework, or while you're sitting in a work meeting and instead of listening to the person talking to you, you're thinking about what to get for lunch or dinner and what groceries you need to buy. It could also be that you're very hyperactive and you can't sit still for a longer period of time. You might feel like your legs are starting to burn if you have to sit around for a long time, or you constantly find yourself shifting in your seat. All of those symptoms could be symptoms of ADHD. And all of those symptoms can profoundly affect your life. It could affect your academics, it could affect your work performance, it can even go into your personal life and affect relationships, romantic relationships, relationships with your family or friends. And a lot of ADHDers actually struggle to keep and maintain their friendships. While ADHD is often perceived as a primarily hyperactive disorder, after all, it's in the name, ADHD, Attention Deficit Hyperactivity Disorder, but it encompasses much more symptoms. So actually, ADHD can be split into 3 subcategories. So there is a hyperactive type, there is a predominantly inattentive type, and then there is that combined type of ADHD. But we will get into the 3 subtypes at a later time. The misconception that ADHD is mainly a hyperactive disorder overlooks all the other symptoms, like, for example, emotional regulation, which is often a huge struggle, trouble to organize, to prioritize, to start a task, to pay attention, and to focus on something important. All of these symptoms can really impact our day-to-day life. So let's start with this first symptom of ADHD, that is hyperactivity. For hyperactivity, I think oftentimes we have that typical stereotype in our mind of that hyperactive young boy that's bouncing off the walls and can't sit still. But hyperactivity doesn't need to be physically, but it can also be a mental hyperactivity. So it could be that, for example, you might find it really challenging to rest and just watch TV without any distractions. You might find yourself always grabbing your phone while you're watching TV because it's just not stimulating enough. Or when you're going to sleep, you notice that all your thoughts just keep racing in your mind and you can't fall asleep. All of these symptoms or all of these signs could be signs of hyperactivity. For me personally, the mental hyperactivity is the most challenging aspect of the hyperactivity. And that's also what most of my clients tell me, because imagine just if your thoughts never stop and they just keep racing, that can be super overwhelming. It can be super hard to just kind of turn off for the night, fall asleep, or to just rest. Have you ever experienced that type of restlessness in maybe a meeting or in the classroom where your mind just keeps spinning? You might not be able to pay attention to the person talking in front of you because you have so many thoughts running through your head, or you might always constantly find yourself shifting in your seat. You might be tapping your foot just to kind of get rid of all that excess energy that you're having. Maybe you've also noticed that you're really struggling to do any quiet activities like reading, like watching TV, or coloring. You might always gravitate towards grabbing to your phone while you're watching TV, or getting distracted when you're reading and not actually focusing on what you're reading. All of these signs could be symptoms of hyperactivity. Now for the next symptom, impulsivity, that's often characterized by impulsive action. So you might find yourself interrupting other people while they're talking, that you're impulsively maybe purchasing something or making a decision that you normally would not have done. And that impulsivity can of course also impact you really much. It could impact, for example, friendships, because you're always interrupting other people. You might not be able to listen to their conversation. It could also impact your bank account because you're impulsively purchasing items that you should not be purchasing or that you don't have money for. It could also impact your work life. You might impulsively quit jobs. You might impulsively say something that you should not or wouldn't have said otherwise, or that you're yelling at your boss, or also saying something that could then hurt you in the long term. Another symptom of ADHD is inattentiveness. So you might find yourself having a really hard time paying attention to detail, that you're always miswriting something, that you're always missing something. It might also be that you're having a hard time listening to a person when they're speaking to you. It could be also if you're reading something that you find yourself, you've read a whole page, but you have no recollection of what it actually said. Inattentiveness can also really impact your personal relationships, because you might always appear withdrawn. You might not be able to listen to your partner, to your friends, to your family. So they might get mad at you or end a friendship relationship. Another ADHD symptom is hyperfocus, and hyperfocus is defined by an intense absorption of a task, of a project. And while it's often seen as something very positive, which it can be, I will get to that later, but it can also be something negative, because it might lead you to only focus on the task and you forget everything else around you. You might forget to meet up your friends. You might forget to call someone back. You can also hurt yourself because you might forget to eat all day long. You might forget to drink. You might forget to go to a toilet. You forget to do your household chores because you get so absorbed with a certain task or hobby that you like. For those of you who are also big Gilmore Girls fans, might remember the scene of Paris Geller where she is obsessed with the hot glue or hot glue gun, and just glues everything all night long and forgets to sleep, she forgets to eat, she forgets to go to the classes. That's what hyperfocus could possibly look like. Another symptom of ADHD can be disorganization. That can be an ADHD symptom that is drawn back to executive function challenges. And if you're interested, I can do a whole video about executive function challenges and what that means, because that's another big topic. But for disorganization, that can of course also impact your life in a great way. You might not always find things that are very important, like for example your tax documents. You might be so disorganized that you forget that a deadline is approaching, like the tax deadline, which can have big precautions. You might always forget your doctor's appointment, work meetings, school meetings, whatever it might be. It can have a huge impact on your life. Another ADHD symptom that can have a big impact on us is irritability and emotional dysregulation. I feel like these two symptoms, or kind of that one symptom, isn't really talked about a lot, even though it affects us greatly. This emotional dysregulation or irritability often arise from chronic stress that we're experiencing and not being able to regulate our emotions properly. You might be experiencing sudden mood swings, reacting out of proportion, for example, yelling at people, getting super angry or super sad for no apparent reason, and then that emotion kind of takes over and you feel like you're not in control anymore. And this can then lead to intense reactions, like for example, breaking up with your partner. It could be throwing your laptop on the floor because you're super mad, or breaking something else, or even hurting yourself because you're just feeling these intense emotions and they're just kind of overtaking you. And these intense emotional fluctuations can of course put a strain on your relationships. It can put a strain on your romantic or friendships, but it can also put a strain on any work relationships, because you might be reacting out of proportions and other people might not understand why you're doing something. It can also cause you to then withdraw more from people because you feel ashamed of your emotions. You're scared that you can't handle them in a certain way, or that you have certain outbursts. So that can have, of course, a huge impact on your life. Now, the last symptom that I want to talk about today is lack of motivation, and that can also have a huge impact on us ADHDers, because you might struggle to start any tasks that aren't super exciting. And let's face it, especially as adults, we often have to do tasks that we don't love. So that can again impact so many different areas of our life. It could impact work, it could impact our personal life, relationships, our household. Just imagine that you're procrastinating on, for example, getting groceries, because that is boring. It might be super overwhelming, so you then always resort to ordering out or eating out. That can of course put a strain on your bank account. It could also be that you hate texting people back, so that can strain your relationships. It might also be that you're struggling to complete certain tasks at work that aren't super exciting, and that can then of course impact work again. So all of these ADHD symptoms can impact us in so many different areas of life, and ADHD isn't just limited to, let's say, school, academics, or work, but it can really impact all the different layers of life. Since we talked about so many ADHD symptoms, I also want to touch on the topic of diagnosis and what that process can look like. ADHD is a very complex medical condition, and there's not one thing that causes ADHD. However, scientists believe that it is mainly genetic cause. So if your parents or some family members have ADHD, it might be that they handed them down to you, kind of like hair color, that if your parents have blonde hair, they might hand that down to you, or if they have brown hair, black hair, and so on. But then of course also just environmental reasons can shape that even more. So for example, school life, younger years. Now, for receiving a diagnosis, there's unfortunately not one single test that can immediately tell you that you have ADHD. So it's always best to consult with your general practitioner, and then they might be able to refer you to a psychiatrist, to a psychologist, or depending on where you're located, also a nurse practitioner. And then these medical professionals will do a series of different tests. They will then conduct a comprehensive evaluation that typically involves interviews, a series of different tests, questionnaires, and maybe also asking your family members or your parents for more information. But getting a diagnosis isn't always a straightforward path. It can often be quite complicated, and for me it took several years to get a diagnosis. I was first diagnosed with 26, so I had to wait quite a long time to firstly figure out that I might have ADHD, finding a specialist, then waiting the wait time, and then finally getting my diagnosis. If you take one thing away from this video, please remember that you're not alone and that there is help out there, there are resources out there, and there are people there to support you. If you're interested in watching more ADHD related videos, please leave a like and a subscribe, and maybe also comment. I would love to hear some suggestions about some topics that you want to hear, learn more about, and explore more about. And then we'll see each other next Wednesday. Bye.